everyone. Welcome back to another episode of Growth Colony. I'm Shaheen Huda with X Growth, and today we're diving into a space that doesn't often get a spotlight in marketing circles, the mining sector. Joining me is Alex Lloyd, Head of Marketing at Advanced Navigation, a company that's doing some seriously cool stuff with cutting-edge tech that gets embedded into everything from defense systems to marine vehicles and, yes, mining operations. We're talking about marketing in an industry where deals take years, product specs kind of rule the conversation, and your product is just one little black box inside a much bigger black box. So how do you stand out? How do you move the conversation from what this is to why does this matter? How do you tackle an ABM program when your target account has 5 different divisions that barely talk to each other? Alex is in the thick of this shift, taking a highly product-led company and turning it into a value-driven marketing machine. If you're in B2B and wondering how to crack high-stakes, complex industries, this podcast is for you. On that note, let's dive in. Alex, thanks for coming on the pod.
So good to be here. Perfect intro. That was a really good summary.
Now that's I'm really excited to talk about this, and some people might listen to this and be like, "Oh, mining sector, what is that about?" And I think it's true that it's more relevant to certain geographies and not all geographies. I mean, it's a fairly big sector here in Australia. It's a big sector in some of the Asian countries and in Canada, but maybe not everywhere. But it's also a very complex sector. It's just so many moving parts. And I want to start with the big picture. Marketing to mining sector isn't the average B2B play. I want to get your thoughts on what do you think that makes the mining sector such a unique beast when it comes to marketing, especially from your perspective and what you're doing at the company.
Yeah, so I think from my experience, I mean, I was very much in B2C advertising marketing for many, many years. And then more recently helped found a startup fintech, and we quickly moved to enterprise sales during COVID. And sort of my first real exposure to sort of very lengthy, complex technology sales to enterprise businesses. And I think it was important context for me when I was considering my next move, and then obviously heard about advanced navigation.
You converted.
I mean, and for me, the great thing about marketing is that the industry expertise is very important, because you have to understand the buyers to a very deep level, and you really understand how to position your products properly at all the different stages of consideration and purchase. But the need to understand how marketing functions and really how they develop those practices within different types of organizations is the fundamental part of all of this. And that's kind of what's exciting, is when you see an organization that is simply looking at marketing as sort of this lead generation, passive kind of thing where it's all organic or social or PR, without sort of understanding how it pulls customers in, and pushes the product out to market, not just kind of is a receiver of these things. So in my last job, I sort of saw how those long cycles really developed and how you can partner with those customers to help them make easier buying choices. And I'll give you slightly outside the mining sector. I'll just give you a good example. Is we surveyed, after about 18 months of working with some large companies, we surveyed them all. We did some personal interviews, and we kind of just did a heuristic of a emotional map of the onboarding and user experience of our products. It was a very cool product at the time. So all the initial sort of sentiment towards the experience was really, really high. And then it got to, once we started engaging with them and giving them demos, and, sentiment increased. And essentially, because it was a financial product, it had fairly lengthy and onerous compliance obligations and fairly strong contracting things. And then obviously the sentiment dropped way off, because a lot of them thought as a new technology provider, this is going to be really simplistic. And so they was kind of surprised by that experience. And then once they got past that and started using the product, the sentiment went up significantly. So then the conversation was, so when we're selling complex technology, how do you get past that? Because, you can't improve a contract. Like, they're very lengthy, and, and you can put in sort of plain English and do those sort of things. But instead, the aim was just tell people it's going to suck. And just tell them that part of the process is happening. And sentiment went up 50% after about 6 months of onboarding a few more customers through that. And we did some post-survey to check. So what I learned was that it's not always the product that fixes everything. The buying experience can very much be managed by some marketing input, and experiential sort of qualities and attributes around the business as well. So when I looked at advanced navigation, they were very much selling to almost every industry, from aerospace, agriculture, education, obviously oil and gas, mining, all those types of companies, and defense. And I was just thinking, how can you be doing that effectively across all of those organizations when you're very light marketing team, those type of things, and they're very sales led. So when I started having conversations with them and then realizing that they sort of operated through the marketing functions that they had previously, I think that was the big light for me. And I was thinking this would be amazing to come in and really show them how they can engage with these customers on a deeper level and really kind of look for opportunity to have specialization, really have clear strategies in how to obtain the share of wallet from how people are buying technology relevant to the business, and be really focused and hopefully have, show significant commercial outcomes from it. So I think the mining sector is the same. There's many buying groups. You've got the mine site operators, you've got the OEM manufacturers that are producing the vehicles and technology, and then you've got sort of technical consultants or system integrators that are sort of woven throughout, either internal or external. And they're all really important. But the business was selling from a very product-led perspective versus talking to the value that they had. And I think that's what excited me. I just thought, came from B2C. I worked in advertising for many years. I really taught to understand the emotional drive of behavior change. And I was excited that I could come in and apply to something that was very engineering and product-led and help them understand the value of how that sits in the overall structure of the marketing function, marketing and sales.
Yeah, interesting. I mean, you definitely did mention product-led a couple of times in our previous chat as well. Can you talk a little bit about what did that look like beforehand? And then what were the elements that you transformed or work on the transformation of after joining?
Yeah, in the early days in the company, it was in my first sort of 90 days, I sat a lot with the sales team to understand how they sold the products. And it was very reliant on a specification and a claim of industry-leading specification. And of course, that doesn't win the business a lot of the time, because people are willing to forego the best specification for price, for additional functionality, for durability, for reliability, all those sorts of things. So I think, when I started looking at the way that we describe the value of the product, it was very myopic. It was really narrow and always claiming the world's best something. And a lot of that fact is true. I mean, this company is so innovative. They have created, 6 or 7 world firsts since they've sort of been in operation, and some really amazing technology. That's not taking anything away from that, but it's just not true for all buyers needing the best specification. So I think when I started sort of understanding how do we look at an account overall, how do we know who's buying and what their buying criteria are? If you go to a large international mining conglomerate, they will have very strong procurement guidelines, especially if they're listed or if they're privately owned. Some of them have fairly strong environmental targets. Most of them are kind of mandated these days. And so simply kind of working with their procurement department to understand what our environmental impact might look like in manufacturing and how we can help them save, and be more efficient in their mining operations, that can be a huge consideration for purchase, because they might move us above somebody who doesn't have the same level of compliance to environmental impact, but maybe a more performant product. So I think my view was that I really wanted to get deeper into the needs of the customers and help message around the products outside of the product specification.
Interesting. So did you go back kind of like identifying different buying centers, building messaging for them? Did you do that across like all products? Did you decide some of the products? Did you approach a messaging that kind of encompasses all of those?
I think, yeah, we're definitely doing it through a sort of a piece-by-piece process. So firstly working with Chief Revenue Officer, who's been amazing at kind of like bringing the whole team, the go-to-market team, including sales and working with product, to really focus on where we should be trying to win. So again, narrowing down that focus rather than trying to service all this, because obviously trying to understand every potential use case for inertial navigation there's just so many.
Yeah.
So that was really critical. And that's kind of, mining clearly came out as where a sovereign provider of those technologies, the supply chain is a little bit more robust, where you can get products to those customers really quickly. And so it's a big opportunity for us to really seize that market. And then it was very much about understanding who are the buyers within those groups, what are the drivers for purchase. As many marketers now kind of understand the category entry point for people considering new technologies like INS to sit along their existing technology platforms on these vehicles. I mean, mining sites have been working on autonomy for a very, very long time. Safety is a big factor in a lot of those autonomous systems. So they know a lot about this. But even still, if you start talking about very technical aspects of those, they're very much within very small parts and small departments of the overall program of purchase. So it was really about understanding as many of those different things as possible, starting to frame some of the building the awareness of advanced navigation through those category entry points. So just really kind of talk to some of those areas where they maybe are having existing problems that are impacting efficiency, yield in whatever material they're digging up, and Alex, just starting there.
If I can just interject for 1 second, you talk about category entry point, and I want to just clarify that in terms of what you mean by that. Is that kind of like a beachhead opportunity that you would see, be like, we're not going to have a generic message. We want to go very laser focused in terms of what we're offering in this particular category, and then hope to expand the account from that angle. Is that what you mean by that?
Yeah, well, it's Ehrenberg-Bass sort of framework. So what they talk about is having awareness is not particularly useful in many cases. I know exactly who Ferrari are. I'm not sure I'm going to go and buy a product from them anytime soon. I hope I have the chance to. But being very much aware of any other car company that has a product that's suitable for the things that I would consider when I want to buy a car. So whether it's transporting my children, having the ability to travel on long trips, having an engine that's maybe a little bit more sporty, all those sorts of things, is when I think about buying a car, I think about those things as the valuable kind of framework for how I'd go and choose a model. So there's that kind of value-driven kind of view, but then there's the parts that the moments in your life that drive that decision. So whether it's the fact that my car's breaking down all the time, or it's too sluggish and not sporty enough and it's not really interesting, or I don't have enough space for my kids and their equipment and all those sort of things. So those moments in time drive your entry point into the category to go, okay, I'm sick of this, I need a new car. So when you're framing the customer experience, which is not talking about the product, you're saying, are you sick of having no space for your kids and their toys in your car to go to the park?
I can definitely relate to that one.
It's a very deep emotional connection to why they want to solve that problem and the pain point they have. So essentially, it's the entry point in which you would consider the category. And so if you really understand the customer, then you can frame your products around that experience, and therefore build salience and understanding that if I'm not just aware, but I would have, I'd attribute your product to that entry point, you're able to build consideration and probably have a higher propensity for someone to go and buy that product versus something else. I mean, chocolate have been doing it so well for so many years. Like you look at Snickers, as you have it when you're hungry and you need sort of to be satiated. Kit Kat, you have it when you have a break. And they own these two experiences. You walk out of the office and you just need a break. You have a Kit Kat. You're not yourself when you're hungry. They do really well at understanding these two kind of experiences. I mean, and chocolate's the same. It's a chocolate-covered nougat. One's got nuts in it, fine, but they're essentially the same thing. But they have very strong understandings of when and how you would consume that product.
I love Alex's B2C side coming out here. That's awesome. I want to still dig a little bit deeper with regards to the category entry point. So you'd be looking at the experience that the customer is going through, and then translating that into the problem that you can solve. especially looking at these accounts, would you run a whole campaign against, one category entry point? Would you do multiple in one campaign? Because an account is would you take an account focused lens, especially in mining? Large companies, would you take multiple category entry points, and package them in one and tackle different sides of the business? Or it's like, hey, this is the one that we're going to go to market, and this is the program we're going to run, and we're going to hit this department with this message and see if we can get in?
Yeah, at the moment, this is still fairly new. We've really only been doing this well for, I'd say, 6 months or so. And so where you don't really want to try and own too many category entry points. It's very hard to do that. It's very expensive to do that, build all that material and have enough energy to build awareness with as many category buyers as possible around lots of different category points, because you're then confusing them. You throw 10 balls at someone, they might catch one. You throw the one that you want them to catch at them, they will catch that one, sort of thing. So I think we're picking the most informative category entry points that we, from our understanding and the research we do with our partners, that are driving consideration of the category. So in, say, mine site automation for vehicles, so haulage, autonomous haulage, one of the key issues is they have dropouts in the signal and around GPS signal that is really kind of the core driver of or navigator of a lot of these vehicles. But because they're in deep mines or they're going underground, the technology or the ability for them to navigate precisely is very, very hard, because they'll get signal dropouts and all those sort of things. So what happens is they'll have their trucks will stop, or they'll have to slow down. They have to run them further apart, and therefore they get less volume through the mine site. So all of this is driving inefficiencies and a lack of productivity. And so if you focus on that, if you're saying that your haul trucks are having to stop because they're losing signal, and therefore that is costing you thousands of dollars a minute, which it really does, you can then say, if that's what you're struggling with, and that's one of the major areas where you can see some very incremental improvements in technology that would get you significant gain, that's a great place for us to start. So, we can talk about the fact that you're having an onboard sensor that allows you to kind of fill the gap between those dropouts and allow those vehicles to continue moving, solves that problem. But you don't want to say that in the category entry point. You kind of want to just frame the fact that we understand that this is one of the reasons why you would start looking for other technology solutions to solve that problem. And then through your content strategy, your communication plan, you try to unpack it at the right times, at the right level of detail, based on the audiences then that you're talking to. So obviously engineering teams, you get very scientific and you show them the real workings behind the performance reports and those type of things. Whether it's the business teams, you might be talking about other case studies where you have other successful customers that have improved operations and through more commercial metrics, whatever it might be. But yeah, I think at the top, you really try to understand why someone would get in, be looking for a solution, consider the category, and then you can kind of unpack it from there.
I love it. Mining buyers often sit in very long and complex sales cycles. There's a lot of moving parts. You talked about procurement. Procurement is involved in every part. There are a lot of elements to it. And you kind of touched on the technical versus non-technical, but I'm keen to unpack that a little bit more in terms of, when you're going after a mining account, what is the view from your side in terms of what is the buying committee, how many people how many kind of buying groups you need to think about? You talked about engineers and kind of business, let's call it the business buying center. How many buying centers are there? And usually when you look at that map, how many individuals are you kind of looking at?
Yeah, look, you can go from the very top all the way in, which is very complex. There's a lot. It's quite slow because, a lot of the time these guys are just looking at very long-term initiatives. Whereas, if you go further into the business, all these people are struggling with day-to-day issues that they're trying to find solutions for. We can work from the outside in. So a lot of the system integrators, we have a few partners in terms of who work with large OEMs or a mine site and providing them technology solutions for specific projects or problems they have. Or you could be working with the OEMs and talking about, large scale manufacturing needs. And
OEMs stand for
original equipment manufacturers. So it could be a Caterpillar, Komatsu, Hitachi, those types of businesses where they're producing the vehicle itself. They might be either retrofitting a large fleet of an existing vehicle fleet on a mine site. They might be producing a new vehicle. Let's say they're moving into electrical vehicles and trying to find more digital ecosystem focused products, so less analog products to fit into a digital vehicle. And so they would have specific requirements for vehicles that they're producing. I mean, I think globally the production of mine vehicles that need higher levels of autonomy is in the hundreds of thousands over the next 10 years. And so the market is really big, and there's lots of people working across that. So if you were working with a large organization, they have a lot of future-focused initiatives. So looking at large transformations in their business around safety or reduction in environmental impact, improvements of equipment performance, whatever it might be. And they usually got a working group of lots of different organizations planning to develop a solution for like 5 years down the track. So those are important conversations to have, because usually that's when you get designed in to a solution. You might have someone that is really trying to solve a need right now, as I mentioned before, and we get a lot of inbound activity saying, hey, I've just got to find international navigation for this particular problem. Sometimes they are sort of engineering sort of low level or under management who've just been given a task to go to market and find all the different inertial navigation solutions that are sort of at a certain level. And they're just kicking tires to try and get spec sheets and bring it all back into the engineering team. And so it's really important to obviously provide them the right information at the right time. So it really does vary. That being said, if you map most of our conversations with our customers and all the way through to true purchase and scale, it is 12 to 18 months to many years. And the relationships last a very long time. And so there's a lot of benefit to it long term, but it takes a lot of time to kind of work with a lot of those technical programs that they might have. So sell them an initial product to do some bench testing and for their technology team to be comfortable with. And they might do a comparative test across different market products. Then they'll do a alpha or some sort of beta program internally where they put it on a vehicle or a few vehicles. Then they might deploy it to an individual regional kind of mine site or a location. And then you kind of get the enterprise deals where they're long-term.
And then we retire and we're like, I didn't get to see that end result of that. But that's fascinating. So it's not only the buying centers within the organization, but also all these other buying centers, or the you might not call them buying centers, but really influencing centers of the system integrators. You talked about the OEM, and curious to know, do you find that going direct to OEMs and then into an account is a better way to go about it, or is it from the account influencing the account to for lack of a better word, dictate some of those requirements to an OEM for the OEM to incorporate you in there? From that side, do both work? How are you going about there?
Yeah, I don't want to sit on the fence, but both do work. I mean, there's a lot of mine sites that they have those arrangements in place. So they will have an OEM supplier, and then that's the agreement that they have. And it's very rare to have other OEM manufacturers kind of getting in and sort of overtaking that mine site in a sort of a really aggressive growth strategy. It's kind of like those decisions for those providers are made at the top level. And so you could be dictated to be part of, let's say they go through one of those research programs and their internal engineering teams see value in your products, and they could dictate that their OEM manufacturers consider you as part of their platform build. On the other side, you could be talking to an OEM who are developing something independently and then going and selling it back to one of those existing partners, which is also very successful. So I'd say the large deals happen the large and longer deals happen at the high end. But I think, if you talk about influencers and buyers, we focus a lot on obviously the engineering quality of our products. We manufacture in Australia. We have a lot of IP that's built into there. We're not just buying parts and putting them all together. We have a lot of original IP in terms of how those products are designed and operate. And because of that level of involvement in our products, then we're able to display that to a lot of our customers and sort of prove out that we have that level of understanding. And it also makes our products more flexible. So when we're working with a lot of the requirements, we can actually provide more service to those customers in what they actually need. So the conversation at the technology or the technical and engineering level is really important for our heritage as a business. And it's kind of like a differentiator for us, as well as our ability to provide great value for our customers. So we do focus on those conversations and then grow the connections throughout the business to kind of make sure that the advocacy for us is supported with the right documentation and material.
Yeah, got it. I want to come back and touch on one thing another angle of approaching an account that you talked about, which is the system integrators, which, OEMs might be fairly unique to, I don't want to say fairly unique to mining sector, but it is, it is not as popular, or it's not as common to see that in a lot of other industries. Again, maybe navigation, maybe defense, there's elements there, but system integrators are there in all major accounts. And in some cases, if you're trying to get into even a banking, big financial institution, or a telco, or sometimes, especially the GSIs, the global system integrators, are they hold the keys. And it's like, if you want to get into this account, you have to get into through Deloitte. If you're going to try to get into this account, you have to have Accenture. You have to have, I don't know, McKinsey or whatever it is. McKinsey is not a GSI, but you get my point. Do you have a strategy for kind of the influencing and developing awareness in the SI network as well?
Yeah, I mean, so our event program is really specifically targeted around highly technical events. So we've got some incredibly smart people here in the organization. Our head of photonics division, Dr. Lyle Roberts, is a really great advocate for the business, but in terms of the commercial benefits, but also obviously is very gifted and smart and able to describe the technology at a very deep level. And so having individuals like him in the business, we put them behind a podium whenever we possibly can, because generally, like you say, the influence that those groups have that really want to understand some more of the technical and mechanical kind of operations of these integration programs, that's where they are. So, which is great, because also a lot of the time we don't have to go and buy huge event stands and spend a lot on sponsorship. If we can get into those and sort of get that level of attention with a very confined or a controlled audience of those types of individuals, it's really, really valuable for us. And then generally that sparks a lot of conversation. Those people are heads of programs of autonomy or automation or efficiency or whatever it might be. Those are generally the people that we see in those audiences. So we have a program of work that we really specifically target those types of events.
Yeah, and it sounds like it's an event-driven program it's the heart of that SI program.
Yeah, I mean, events are really important, and all the supporting material that they need, because they, you could tell anyone that the products are amazing. If you don't have really great evidence for how it works, you need that supporting documentation. So the product documentation, the sort of the case studies, or at least the real world reports of the product. Again, Dr. Lyle Roberts just presented some new technology for a laser velocity sensor that we're pairing with our inertial navigation technology, which is just groundbreaking in its accuracy. And it's supported with a significant amount of evidence. And we've got some great tech explainers that we're releasing on the website, those type of things. So people can kind of really go there, go to the website, really interrogate the products to a high degree and validate for themselves that they believe that it does what we say it does. So that's also, you need that level of evidence for the system integrators. The businessmen will generally be more happy with a case study and someone sort of advocating for your product or having great testimonial. But eventually the technology question and conversation will happen. So you need that.
The technical team will kick in. You've talked about
you can't avoid it. And I think that's one of the major things is, like, it's not in this program of work or in this shift to value. you're not discrediting the technical aspect of the buying.
Yeah, and that's such a good point. Such a good point.
It's just not the only thing that you need to do to be really effective. And especially, if you talk about out of category buyers or out of market buyers, for instance, these people have got suppliers. They don't have a budget. They've got a program of work that's got to go through all this business qualification internally. All you need to do is build an awareness that you should be the one that they reach out to when they're ready to buy. And you're not going to do that through a specification. So, there's a great program of work, or sort of a body of work, called the cost of dull. And this is, again, mostly in the B2C space, but they talk about all the different types of materials that communicate effectively and how it makes people feel, and then remember brands and consider brands. And in this kind of 4-box matrix, there's a fairly complex list of all these different materials that you can provide someone, from TV commercials to webinars to whatever. And it's the cross goes from most dull, least interesting, or least memorable, to most memorable, most interesting. And specification sheets is literally in the bottom left hand corner. It's like the least impactful thing that you can provide someone to provide a long term memorable experience for them to consider you. So it's great for mid funnel, when they really need to consider and convert that interest into opportunity. But it's not for the rest of it. So it is really important, but it's just not the whole story.
I feel like some people really go, when they're like, oh, we really need to talk to the pain point, they go too far in one end. Of course, there are a lot of organizations who are too on the technical side, but then there's some organization go too far onto the other side. I know I want to touch on, you talked about content, and you and I touched about kind of spec sheets. From spec sheets to storytelling. And I'd love to kind of hear what role does content play in your kind of account-centric approach and strategy for, the likes of the BHPs and the Rios, and, the kind of format that you're seeing that is working, not maybe spec sheets, but what is kind of working? What are you testing with to kind of grab the attention and the interest of some of these accounts that you're going after?
Yeah, I mean, so the big accounts they're still built on relationships. You really need to be able to connect with these people for long periods of time and get along with them and help them feel like there's empathy towards what they're going through, and understanding of the commercial and technical problems. And that the way that those relationships are built are through great storytelling, is making them laugh and helping them say, we fully understand that this is your day-to-day experience. And so in the way that you just hold a meeting and kind of walk someone through a presentation is a really important storytelling opportunity, where someone goes, I get it, and you get us, and let's cut to the chase. And just that level, whereas somebody dives in and they're just kind of not really presenting that level of empathy or understanding, there's a sense that you kind of need to prove yourself more, because then it purely just comes down to the product capability, not the business operations, not the relationship that you have. So yeah, and you just go back to the fact that people remember great stories, or people remember how you make them feel. And for those experiences that are really built on relationships, that's really critical. And so if we've got great stories to tell, and we have great people to tell the stories, great communicators, it's just we're becoming more and more effective. There have been instances where we've heard of stories where people have meetings and they purely talk about technical jargon, and the people in the meeting are kind of more confused at the end than they were at the start. And it's just because it was a terrible story and not a great strategy in trying to help them, walk them through the reason why they should at least consider or buy, or so I think it seems like an odd bedfellow. You have a very technical product, but I hate this idea of B2B, B2C. It's more complex, but you're still dealing with people. You still need to make people feel good about you as a potential partner. You still need people to feel like you understand them. And I don't know how else to do that through storytelling than that type of practice.
I love it. I want to ask you a couple of rapid fire questions before we wrap up, but is there anything else before we've kind of finished this discussion that you think it's important that we didn't touch on the mining sector and complex accounts?
Well, I think, having a a view that it is not just within one part of an organization is just so critical, and having a long-term view on all of these accounts. I mean, if you're really looking for the ones and twos, it's not going to be, you're probably not going to have the best strategy in mind of how you get it. If you're just thinking about closing that deal, because they really need long-term engagement to make sure that they have a partner that's going to support, the long-term goals. So I'd say the view that you have on an account has to be really long-term. So account-based engagement works versus, I mean, that's probably what it is. I mean, if I could answer that question in a better way, is leads to account-based metrics, right? So how do you score an account versus how you score a lead? That's a big part of the conversation. I mean, you asked as one of the warm-up questions, knowing how you look at how many people in that account you have access to. What's your surface area across that key account? Are you actively trying to build contacts in other parts of the department that you're not actively talking to? So are you, just the fact that you're talking to engineering team doesn't mean you shouldn't understand who's in that rest of that organization or in those departments that are meaningful, and try and build ways that you can have a broader conversation outside those teams with the right people, and have a much more comprehensive account view and a scoring of the account view versus just, acting on an individual lead that comes through the business. Because as many people know, the great work that Sixth Sense and others are doing, it's a terrible metric.
Alex, let's do some rapid fire questions. I think we unpacked a lot of things there, but I want to do some rapid fire questions before we wrap up. First question I got is, what is one resource? This could be a book, a blog, a podcast, a talk, whatever it is, that has had a pretty foundational impact on you, but recently, maybe in the past 3 to 6 months.
The Uncensored CMO with John Evans is a brilliant podcast. It really talks about the impact. I mean, they're covering more and more B2B stories than they used to. It was very much a B2C kind of agenda, or sort of the guests that they had in. But that's probably one. Like Antonia Wade, who's the CMO at one of the large consultancies, has written a book called Transforming the B2B Buying Journey. And it's an amazing book. I think that's probably about 2 years old or something now. And it's an incredible book that, there's just not many out there that kind of document a much more real process, and give you kind of really good practical advice. So I'd say that there's quite a few. On Strategy is another kind of podcast, which really dives into kind of, because all of this isn't really about the product. It's about understanding how to understand the product and understand the buyer, and how to get to really great commercial outcomes. Any of that just breaks you out of what the norms are for B2B or in your industry. I think if you look outside and pull some of those influences in, I think it's always a good idea.
It's always gold. Yeah, absolutely. If you could give one piece of advice to B2B marketers, what would it be?
Creativity matters.
I love it. Who are some of you've already mentioned this, with the podcast and John Evans, but who are some of the kind of thought leaders, influencers that you follow and you listen to?
Yeah, I think, I've got a pretty broad, taste in material, but I think, in terms of, I read Playing to Win by Roger Martin, and, just fundamentally understanding how to look at a strategic plan of attack and understand what the difference is between strategy and tactics. And it's kind of, the strategy cascade is the simplest one. It's like very easy to remember. I know there's like Michael Porter, he's got like a whole lot of other frameworks, but he was great. And then I actually did the IDEO designing strategy course, which he helped write, and he was part of that course. I'm pretty sure he's still part of that course. I know, for instance, that Mark Ritchen's mini MBA, he now includes Roger Martin in the business aspects of brand management. I haven't done.
Yeah, interesting.
Yeah, I did those courses.
He was on the podcast just last week.
Mark was,
or the week, the week before. Yeah.
I've tried to steer away from all the stuff that him and Sharp and everyone. We talk about category entry points, but they're so prolific and ubiquitous now that it's kind of a bit repetitive if I just kind of say what they say, But it's more from my experience. I think, they are very influential. when I did that course, it was groundbreaking.
No, I know, but I know what you mean. I mean, it's the foundations, and then you want to kind of build on the foundations.
Yeah. So I think outside of that, a lot of the stuff I read and listen to are just about being as empathetic as possible and understanding why people actually buy. A lot of people buy because they want to spend more time with their kids, or they just don't want to get fired, or they want a promotion and they want the bonus, or like they're all emotional drivers. And if you can actually understand that and then read about it and sort of understand more about people and how those things matter, I think you just become a better marketer.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Last question. What's something that excites you about B2B today? Even though I know you said you don't like the B2B, B2C thing, does anything come to mind?
Well, I mean, honestly, if you look at the kind of the buying journeys and you go, everyone that goes into a buying situation has a day one buy list. Therefore, if you're not on that list, you don't get chosen unless it's some odd kind of technical need or some niche kind of feature or something else. And then really like it's the likelihood of you being repurchased for a large account and growing the business. And so you're kind of limited to these sort of like edges of the market. And so the real opportunity for all brands is to build your awareness with those out of market buyers. And you can only do that through brand. So I'm really excited that there is no difference in the way that humans operate. There's a great Ogilvy quote, which I can't remember right now, but, we've developed over millennia a lot of the intrinsic kind of way that we, fight or flight responses. We know if someone's smiling, micro expressions, all those things that matter in the way that we physiologically respond to the world around us are so built into our biology that like the way marketing works doesn't change it. And I think the more investment in brand strategy and really building brand and having to connect with people on that human, more sort of emotional level is an amazing thing for business, because so many people, are driven by spreadsheets and ROI calculations, and it's not a picture of how the world operates. And I think more and more people are starting to realize that that's necessary. The work that Walk is doing right now in terms of the multiplier effect really, really helps that conversation as well. So yeah, I think the realization that brand matters to help with performance activity in the business, and actually like it's just that's really exciting. And yeah, as an old school kind of advertiser and creative, that gives me great hope.
Alex, I want to say thank you so much for coming on the podcast. This was an awesome chat. There are a lot of insights, and thank you so much for your time.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me.
Today's episode of Growth Colony was produced by Liza Maywald and Alexander Hipwell. It was edited by Dave Samito with additional editing by Liza Maywald and music arrangement by Liza and Alexander. Special thanks to Tina Wabe. We couldn't make this show without you. This episode was hosted by Shaheen Hoda, Director of Growth at Xgrowth. If you enjoyed the podcast, please subscribe and give us a rating on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. If you'd like to know more about Growth Colony, check out our newsletter and subscribe with the link in the pod description. Do you think you'd be a great guest or just interested in a chat? Send through an email at podcast@xgrowth.com.au. That's podcast@xgrowth.com.au. Or fill out the form in the description. That's all for now. We'll catch you next week right here on Growth Colony.